I want to say something directly about myth. Myth has two of the essential meanings of myth are the story, the tale, but also the telling of the story. So there's the story and the knowing of it, and then there's the telling of it. There's the recasting of the myth into the moment. So myths are by definition kind of old, or they're old-rooted, but they can be remade for the moment. I mentioned already, myth is about breaking time. That's why they say once upon a time. No one can get upon a time. So it's not a literal statement, it's a statement to break time. Myth is trying to bring the eternal or the timeless into time. I mentioned that it means truth. So you could also say myths are a series of lies that tell the truth. Now, I know a lot of people think that a series of facts might tell the truth, but they don't. Not that facts are, unnecessary or wrong, they're just never enough to tell the story. And the facts can be manipulated. So that most of the time when someone says to you, the fact of the matter is, they're about to lie. You know what I'm saying? And the world is a funny place, because nowadays so much is set up as if they're going to give you the real story, the truth. But really, you never get the truth. Truth is hard to get to, getting harder to get to. So the easiest way to get there is to go by lies. Don't even try for the truth. Try for quality lies. When nothing makes sense, mythic sense is what's missing. Myth is often about the big story. There's two levels, the big story and then how that affects the microcosmic being, which is ourselves, how the myth pronounces through us. And when things get really crazy, that's my advice. Go to a big story that talks about how this whole cosmos works, and oppositely, go to the depth of your own story. When the world around gets mad, the sensibility is mythic. That's what's missing. Myths are universal patterns, eternal archetypal shapes, from which ideas and images, inspirations and inventions continually arise. Myths are part of the ongoing creation. I know people argue about when the creation was and how many days it took and how evolution got going. It's interesting. But what myth says is the creation is now ongoing. It is going on. Every morning the world is reborn from darkness. We are in the living creation. It's much simpler than what they talk about. But once you make that move, you can't control it. You can't say you know about it, because it's actually being created as we live it. And we have to give up the pretense of knowledge, whether it's scientific knowledge or religious knowledge. We have to give that up. Giving that up opens up to the possibility of the myth, which is always mixing the known with the unknown. In telling a myth and in attending to a myth, the myth enters us. We enter the territory of that myth. A story is a mythic territory, a subtle earth, you could say. But in hearing it and in telling it, it enters us as we enter it. The reason I mention that is the effect of the story could hit you 3 or 4 days from now. In other words, it's not simply now, it enters and it can grow inside people. Myth connects us to the real behind the real. Book I wrote recently is The World Behind the World. And the old notion was that the real world, capital R, is the mythic eternal world behind the world. I've been sending emails to committees in Washington suggesting that they can't solve the problems of the world by shifting the pieces of the world around. What they have to do is call on the world behind the world in order to effect change. I can't tell if they get those things. Hearing a myth awakens the mythic story already living inside each of us, and it places us in a mythic condition that reconnects us to core imaginations at the center of our soul. The idea is, I'm going to tell a story, but that story is going to resonate differently in each person, and it has the effect of getting to the core of each person's life, which, as I said, is mythic. And so just the hearing of a myth is at some level an alteration or change in a person's life. In paying enough attention to myth, we can become like the characters in myth who, if you watch them, are in radical modes of change. It's not a myth, or it's not even an interesting story when someone simply says, someone got up, they had their breakfast, they patted their children on the head, the car started pretty well, and they went to work. That's not a story. That's the typical boring things that people get trapped in. The story is always about change. Myth is about change. Stories are about change. Are you ready for a story?